Hi everyone. Welcome to Fong's Fables. Thank you for listening. Let's start. On the day of my English college entrance exam, my father turned off my alarm during my afternoon nap. He only woke me up 5 minutes before the doors closed. I was left outside the exam hall, devastated as I lost my chance at my dream university. Meanwhile, my mother was at home playing cigarette card games with my younger brother, comforting me over the phone, saying, "It's okay if you don't go to college. Start working early to support the family. You'll always be our beloved child." Later, my father sent me to a soul-crushing factory where I spent 10 years tightening screws. I eventually collapsed and died from overwork. But only after my death did I realize the truth. My parents had deliberately orchestrated my failure. They took my compensation money and used it to buy my brother a house. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to that fateful afternoon of my English exam. The old, creaking electric fan on the desk spun noisily, blowing out a thick, humid air. I was no longer gasping from exhaustion on a factory assembly line. My father, smiling kindly, handed me a glass of lemon water. "Paige, English is your best subject. Get some rest and don't worry, I'll wake you up in time." I had been reborn. In my past life, my exam was scheduled for 3 p.m., with entry closing at 2:45. I had set my alarm for 1:40, trusting my father to wake me up. Yet that day I slept until 2:45, only to be woken in a panic. Rushing to the exam site, I was stopped at the entrance. My best subject, the one I had most confidence in, was stripped away. Outside the hall, I broke down in tears. At home, my father apologized guiltily. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I just wanted you to sleep a little longer. I never meant for this to happen. Can you forgive me?" I barely remember how that day passed in a daze. My mother, however, was at home celebrating with my brother, boasting about a newly acquired cigarette card. When she learned about my missed exam, she defended my father. "Your dad works so hard to provide for this family. You should understand if he makes a mistake. And why didn't you set a second alarm for yourself?" She didn't know, or pretended not to know, that my father had turned off my phone alarm. That was the only day I had ever slept so deeply. Without an English score, my overall performance tanked. I wanted to retake the exams, but the expensive tuition fees made my mother sigh and shake her head. "If you can earn enough money during the summer, you can fund your own tuition for a repeat year. You're 18 now, it's time to take responsibility for your own future." But my father secretly signed a labor contract for me. I was thrown into a factory, tightening screws for a decade. My opportunity to reattempt the college entrance exams was lost forever. Long hours of grueling work drained the life out of me, and before I even turned 30, I collapsed and died at my station. My parents gleefully took my wages and compensation money to buy my brother a house. Only after my death did I uncover the truth. On that exam day, my father had drugged me so I would sleep through the entry window. He knew English was my strength, so he destroyed my confidence, ensuring my downfall. Later, he even bragged. Paige was too proud. Her good grades overshadowed Zane. If she kept excelling, how would he feel? This way, she can start working early and bring in money. One day, she'll marry off for a nice dowry. We haven't raised her for nothing. I was nothing but a resource to be exploited, my life sacrificed for my brother's comfort. Now I stared at the lemon water in my father's hands. It took death and rebirth for me to finally see the truth. I had never been loved. Not even a little. My father hesitated as I made no move to take the drink. "Why aren't you drinking?" "You love lemonade," he urged, trying to press it into my hands. I felt nothing but bitter amusement. I shook my head. "I have an exam soon. If I drink this and get an upset stomach, that wouldn't be good. It's homemade, not like the dirty drinks outside are selling. I can take the ice out for you." "I'll pass, Dad. I'm sleepy. Could you leave me alone?" My father faltered but nodded. "All right, get some rest. I'll wake you up when it's time." I lay back down, listening to the whirring fan. It felt good to be alive, but I wouldn't be sleeping. This was the day that had destroyed my life. Heaven had given me another chance. I wasn't going to waste it. At exactly 1 p.m., I pretended to wake naturally, rubbing my eyes as I stepped out of my room. My mother had taken my brother to visit my grandmother. My father, dozing on the sofa, visibly startled when he saw me. "Paige, you're up already? Why don't you sleep a little longer?" I smiled faintly. Didn't want to be late. I figured I'd go early. My father's face twitched with frustration as I grabbed my bag and left. This time the journey was smooth. I arrived at the exam hall without issue, taking a deep breath as I faced the buzzing crowd of students. Could I really undo my greatest regret? After the exam, I returned home to find my mother and brother back. I lounged on the sofa, enjoying the air conditioning while watching a movie. My mother's eyes flickered in surprise. "Paige, your father told me you overslept and missed the exam. Don't worry, sweetheart, college isn't everything. You're still our precious daughter." I smirked. "Oh, but I didn't oversleep. I went early and took the test." My mother's face drained of color. She shot a glance at my father, still sleeping in the bedroom. Hastily, she tried to cover up. "I was just worried for you. I saw some students arrive late and felt bad. Of course, I wanted you to succeed." I turned to my brother, Zane, who was busy flaunting his cigarette card collection. "Mom got me a yellow crane card today. My friends are so jealous." He grinned smugly, his chubby little frame bouncing on the sofa. Then suddenly he shoved me hard. "Move, loser. I want to watch TV." I hit the floor, my elbow throbbing. Instead of scolding him, my mother beamed. "Wow, Zane is getting so strong. What a little man." Without hesitation, I grabbed Zane and slapped him across the face. Once, twice, over and over until his cheeks turned red and swollen. Only when he collapsed, wailing, did I release him. "Since Mom and Dad won't teach you respect, I'll do it for them." Zane screamed and flailed. "Stupid bitch. Worthless trash. Mom, kill her." My mother was stunned. She never expected her obedient daughter to retaliate. She finally snapped out of it, clutching Zane protectively. "Paige, he's just a child. Can't you let it go? You weren't really hurt, were you?" I smiled. "Losing your composure already? Where is that motherly facade you were trying to maintain?" That night, as my family anxiously awaited my results, I feigned disappointment. My English score was outstanding, but the rest had suffered. My parents sighed in relief. "Paige, don't worry. You don't need college. Your uncle found you a great job at a factory. You can start tomorrow." I smiled coldly. This time, I wasn't going to be their sacrificial lamb. The so-called easy job they spoke of was actually selling me to a ruthless sweatshop. Once there, I'd be forced to sign a contract equivalent to a lifelong servitude agreement. But first, I had to escape this home to carry out my plan. This time, though I hesitated with difficulty for a moment, I still obediently nodded. "All right, I'll listen to Dad." Seeing me finally agree, my mother burst into tears of joy, holding my hand tightly. "Paige, it's so far away, I really can't bear to let you go. But you failed the college entrance exam, and you need to support yourself. There's really no other way." I returned her words with fake tears. "Mom, if you really feel bad for me, then give me more money for living expenses and travel. I promise to earn even more in the future to be filial to you and help support my brother." Hearing my self-awareness, my mother smiled with relief. For the first time ever, she generously handed me $5,000. The next day, under their watchful eyes, I stepped into the high-speed rail station. But I didn't go to the factory they arranged for me. Instead, I headed south to another city, one they knew nothing about, and found a job there. When my parents anxiously called to check in, I casually told them I'd found a different job with higher pay, though it kept me busy. By the end of the year, when they saw that I had truly abandoned college applications and was working instead, they seemed reassured. "We won't send you money anymore," they declared. "You're 18 now. It's time to learn how to support yourself." With that, they hung up, leaving me alone for months. This brief taste of freedom allowed me to save up for 2 months. With that money, I enrolled myself in a cram school, catching the very last chance to retake the college entrance exam. In this lifetime, I would complete my education and chase my dreams. No one could force me to compromise. During this time, my parents never forgot to pressure me to send money home. But each time, I found an excuse and never sent a single cent. In my past life, when I worked in the factory, my parents controlled my wages. Once, when I was hospitalized with acute appendicitis and short $1,000 for surgery, I called my mother in pain, begging for money. She cried on the phone. "Where would we get money? That's my life savings. You've been working. How could you still ask us for money?" In the end, my boss lent me the money, but he doubled the deduction from my next paycheck. I endured those unbearable nights alone. Now, even with 2 months' wages, I still couldn't cover all my tuition and living expenses for cram school. During the day, I focused on my studies. At night, I worked in the school cafeteria to sustain myself. When the new year came, I used the excuse of earning triple pay to avoid going home. At last, I made it through to the next year's college entrance exam. After so long of hearing me make promises but never sending money, my father was getting desperate. When he called again, the pleasantries were gone, replaced by irritation. "Paige, I see you've grown up and don't even come home anymore. Tell your boss to give you a break. Your father has something urgent to discuss with you." After pressing them 3 times, my mother finally admitted the truth. They wanted me to come home for an arranged marriage. They had already found me a rich husband. Feigning interest, I asked, "Mom, how rich is he?" "Of course, he's loaded." "Paige, you don't want to have kids, right?" "Well, he already has a son, so you don't have to. It's perfect. You won't find a better match than this." The rich husband in question was a 45-year-old divorced man from the neighboring village. His wife had committed suicide by drinking paraquat the previous year, and he had been unable to find another bride since. After seeing my picture, he had expressed great enthusiasm about marrying me. A chill crept up my spine. It was clear they had no intention of ever letting me go. "But Mom, I got into Newtown University. I'm about to start college. How could I get married?" I cut off her enthusiastic rambling. When she saw my acceptance letter and confirmed that I was set to report to school in a month, her voice trembled and then erupted into a shriek. "What did you just say? You weren't working. You spent this entire year studying." I smiled lightly. "That's right, Mom. I studied hard for a year to surprise you. Aren't you happy for me?" There was a half-minute silence. Then my mother exploded. "You wasted an entire year without earning a penny for the family, and you still expect to go to college. Who do you think will pay for that?" Cold hatred filled my eyes. "I'll apply for student loans. I've grown up. You don't have to worry about me. Paige, raising you was a complete waste. You even learned how to deceive your parents now." Then, as if struck by sudden realization, she sneered. "I get it now. You kept saying you had no money, but you must have found some rich man to support you. You didn't send money home because you were busy selling yourself for a chance to study. Isn't that right? You're nothing but a cheap, selfish, shameless slut. No decent man will ever want you." She was so furious she hung up, unable to keep up the pretense of affection any longer. At that moment, whatever lingering illusion of a mother's love shattered completely. The heartbreak was unbearable, and tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. An hour later, she called again. This time, her tone had softened, her voice syrupy. "Paige, I was too harsh just now. Mom just got too worked up. Getting into university is such wonderful news. How could you hide it from your parents? You haven't been home in a year, living in hardship. Mom has been so worried. I told your dad about your acceptance, and we decided we should throw a banquet to celebrate." I feigned surprise. "Really? Do I even deserve a celebratory banquet? I thought only my brother did." From birth, my parents had never thrown me a single celebratory event. No full-month banquet, no birthday parties, no coming-of-age ceremonies. But after my brother was born, his full-month party, birthday celebrations, every event was extravagant. Now, my mother was suddenly filled with maternal love. "Of course you do. You're just as precious as your brother. Come home, Paige. Let's celebrate properly as a family." I knew it was a trap, but I agreed. I finally understood. My mother only spoke words of love when she wanted something from me. The fragile hope I once had for family ties was now completely dead. But those who once ruined me, those painful experiences, I would make them repay it all. One by one. After an hour-long car ride following my high-speed train journey, I finally returned to the home I had left behind a year ago. The moment I arrived at the village entrance, I saw my parents waiting anxiously. As I walked toward them, their faces flickered with mixed emotions, joy, restrained anger, and most prominently calculation. My mother immediately grabbed my hand, her eyes darting behind me. "Paige, did you come back alone? Where's your college acceptance letter? We've been waiting to show it off to everyone," she asked eagerly. I casually pulled my hand away and shook my head. "The letter hasn't arrived yet. I had it sent to our home address. It should be delivered soon." Hearing this, my parents exchanged glances, their tense expressions easing just a little. My mother, however, held onto my hand tightly, more affectionate than she had ever been, chatting with me as if we had always been close. But her warmth only made my skin crawl. "Paige, you have no idea how much I've missed you this past year. I thought about you so much it hurt right here in my chest." She wiped at the non-existent tears. I gave a silent, mocking smile. The truth was I had received my acceptance letter long ago. It had been sitting at a delivery station in the city where I had been staying, deliberately uncollected. There was no way I would let such an important document fall into their hands. As we stepped into the yard, I spotted Zane, my younger brother, playing with a drone. He didn't even turn to acknowledge me, his eyes glued to his new toy. "Fly! Get up there! Fly!" he shouted excitedly. I recognized the model immediately. It was an expensive brand that cost over $2,000. My parents would never spend that much money on him. So who had bought it for him? Stepping into the living room, I noticed a man sitting there. He was dressed in a well-fitted suit, his thinning hair slicked back with gel, obviously dressed to impress. Instinctively, I knew who he was. This was the 45-year-old divorcee my mother had mentioned, the one who had come to propose marriage. The moment he saw me, he took a sharp breath. My father cleared his throat awkwardly and quickly introduced him. "Paige, this is Uncle Raymond, an old friend of mine. Call him. Look at these gifts. He brought all of it to celebrate your university acceptance." I cast a glance at the table. It was piled with boxes of cigarettes, bottles of alcohol, and expensive tea. Nothing that a college-bound student would ever need. Expressionless, I muttered, "Uncle Raymond." Yet I caught the way his posture changed at my greeting. He stood up hurriedly, scratching his balding head, his voice slightly stammering. "You look even more beautiful than in the pictures. You know, I used to carry you when you were little. You've really grown into a fine young woman." Disgust churned in my stomach, but I smiled and maintained my distance. "And you, Uncle Ray, have aged quite a bit since then." Ignoring the tension in the air, I turned to my mother with feigned innocence. "By the way, Mom, who was that older man you were saying wanted to propose to me? So shameless, trying to marry a college student at his age. Disgusting. Unlike Uncle Raymond here. He looks like a proper gentleman." My mother and the man exchanged glances, their expressions faltering. My father forced a laugh, scolding me lightly. "Enough. Enough. Let's not talk about such things on a happy day." But Uncle Raymond's face darkened. That night, the real feast began. As expected, my parents invited Uncle Raymond to stay for dinner. My father personally poured me a drink, deliberately trying to get me drunk. "Paige, a toast to you. My girl is amazing. Studying so hard, getting into college without costing me a dime, and now you can earn your own money." Uncle Raymond, however, claimed he had quit drinking. He didn't take a single sip, only watching me with a constant, unreadable smile. As the night wore on, my mother excused herself, leaving only my father, brother, and Uncle Raymond in the room. The atmosphere shifted. "Paige." Uncle Raymond suddenly spoke, his tone playful. "You were away for a year. Are you still a virgin? You didn't secretly get a boyfriend, did you?" I remained silent. Zane, eager to please, nudged me and grinned. "Uncle Raymond is talking to you." "What? Did someone take your voice? Just tell us, are you still a virgin? If you won't answer, I'll just pull your pants down and check." My father, drunk and flushed, burst into laughter. "That's my boy." I clenched my fists under the table, but my voice remained steady. I spent the entire year studying at a prep school. There was no time for love. Revenge still unfulfilled. How could I let myself break before them? Zane ignored me, turning to Uncle Raymond with admiration. "Uncle Raymond, that drone you got me is amazing. My classmates are so jealous. Next time, could you get me a remote control race car?" I heard Raymond's low, conspiratorial whisper. "Little brother-in-law, you really know how to read the room. Once I marry your sister, anything you want, I'll get for you." At that moment, I let my body go limp, pretending to be drunk, slumping onto the table. My father waved a hand in front of my face. Seeing no response, he grinned. "Ray, she's out. Now's your chance. She thought she could escape to college. Good thing I had the foresight to bring her back. Girls don't need an education. Better to marry them off early." Zane nodded eagerly. "Yeah, what's the point of her studying so hard? She's just going to end up as someone else's wife anyway." My father continued smugly. "And Ray, since you're getting her ahead of time, you'll need to add another $20,000 to the bride price." Uncle Raymond rubbed his hands together, his voice trembling with excitement. "Old friend, that's not a problem." Zane cheered. "Great. Now hurry up and take my sister to the bedroom." As they carried me toward the room, I felt the weight of their betrayal. These men, my so-called family, were delivering me into the abyss. But they had no idea. A voice recorder had captured everything. As I was laid on the bed, I saw Raymond pop a pill from a silver blister pack. "Paige, you're finally mine. Tomorrow, we'll officiate our marriage. From the moment I saw your picture, I knew I loved you." The overwhelming stench of his breath suffocated me. My vision blurred, not from alcohol but from rage. Survival instinct surged through me. My fingers closed around the object hidden beneath my pillow, a long-bladed slaughterhouse shear. With all my strength, I slashed downward. A scream tore through the night. As sirens blared outside, casting flashing red and blue lights into the room, I staggered to my feet. Blood soaked my hands, my body. My mother burst in and fainted at the sight. My father stared at me, horror-stricken. "Paige, what have you done? When did you call the police?" I met his gaze coldly. "Before you tried to make me drink." I suddenly remembered. Last New Year's Eve, my younger brother stole the date flower buns that Grandma had prepared as an offering. He plucked off all the dates. That night, I was punished and made to kneel in the snow for the entire night. It wasn't even my fault, but they still said, "You're his sister. You're responsible for watching over him. He's just a child. How could he understand? Why didn't you keep an eye on him?" I had heard these words too many times growing up. Favoring sons over daughters? Who doesn't want a perfect family? One son, one daughter. Haven't we fed you? Haven't we clothed you? What are you complaining about? I just wanted to give you a brother. One day when you get married, if you suffer at your in-laws, at least you'll have someone to stand up for you. If you are thinking of getting my hard-earned savings, that money is for my funeral, and for your brother. If you ever dream of getting it, forget it. They always had their reasons, always found excuses for their favoritism. I was never their daughter, never their child. I was just a girl born with the sole purpose of being an elder sister. A child meant to bring a younger brother into the world. My life was meant to be traded for his. But they forgot one thing. The deeper the rot, the cleaner the wound when it's cut out. The wailing of sirens shattered the night. Red and blue lights pierced through the window, casting eerie reflections on my face. "Paige, are you insane? You've lost your mind." My mother staggered into the room, took one look at the mess, and fainted on the spot. I swayed as I stood up, my body trembling like a blood-drenched specter crawling out of hell. Clutching a pair of scissors, I stepped forward under the horrified gazes of everyone present. Dawn was breaking. Police stormed into the house, restraining the man writhing on the floor, along with my parents. As my father was forced to the ground, he looked at me in utter disbelief. "Paige, what have you done? When did you call the police?" My blood-stained hands still trembled. "Before you tried to get me drunk." Everyone was taken away, except for Zane, who had run off in fear. As the one who called the police, I pulled out a recording device from my pocket. Everything I did was self-defense against a crime. My parents were charged as accomplices and placed under criminal detention. Justice would deal with them. When I returned home from the police station, only my brother was there. He had just come back from Grandma's house and was sitting in the living room, playing video games without a care in the world. The courtyard was littered with the shattered remains of his drone. Zane had been a school dropout for a long time. Our parents indulged him, and after he cursed out his teachers and the principal, they simply pulled him out of school. He barely glanced at me, irritation flickering across his face. "Hey sis, when are Mom and Dad coming back?" I packed my bags, my tone indifferent. "They've been locked up. It'll be a while before they're out." "Oh!" He barely reacted, just frowned. "Ugh, so annoying. Leave me some money before you go. I already spent everything Grandma gave me. I want to buy some pizza." I smiled and shrugged. "I don't have money either." Then I turned and walked away without looking back. I cut ties with all of them. In September, I left for university with my acceptance letter in hand. The man who violated me, old Raymond, clung to life even after emergency resuscitation. He insisted on undergoing surgery to reattach his severed privates, but in the end, he didn't survive. Post-op infection took his life in the hospital. My parents, convicted as accomplices, were sentenced to 3 years in prison. For those 3 years, I lived freely for the first time in my life. I flourished. After they were released, they came to my university multiple times, making a scene. Each time, campus security subdued them with electric batons and had them hauled off by the police. Eventually, they got scared. The last time I saw them, they were being restrained by security guards, their faces twisted with rage and desperation. "You ungrateful wretch. If we'd known you'd betray us like this, we should have drowned you in a piss pot when you were born. When did you become so unfilial? So rebellious? Even daring to defy your father?" I walked toward him, my voice quiet but steady in front of all my classmates and passers-by. "Dad, this is the last time I'll ever call you that. You want to know when it all started?" I let out a soft laugh and shook my head. "I knew it was you who drugged me on the morning of my college entrance exam, hoping I'd oversleep and miss it, hoping to send me straight to a factory job. I knew you and Mom wanted to sell me for a price. But when did my heart truly die? I thought for a moment and then realized it didn't matter anymore. Before the police took him away, my father spat venomous threats at me. Paige, don't think you're so smart. No matter what, you can't erase our blood ties. No matter where you go, you're legally bound to support us until the day you die. The world fell silent. Then I spoke, my voice cold and calm. The law exempts children from supporting parents who have committed serious crimes against them. And what you did to your own daughter, I smiled faintly, fits the criteria perfectly. His face contorted in shock. I turned and walked back through the university gates. The very crimes they committed against me became the blade that severed our ties forever. After university, I focused on my studies, pursued further education, and repaid my student loans within my second year of working. From there, I kept climbing higher. Many years passed before I heard about my former family again. A fellow neighbor mentioned Zane, my worthless brother, pampered since birth. He had grown into a reckless gambler. He squandered everything, and our parents spent years paying off his endless debts. My mother's cherished funeral savings? Gone. One night, drunk and desperate for money, Zane came home demanding cash. My father, penniless, refused. Enraged, Zane beat him so brutally that he shattered his spine, leaving him paralyzed from the waist down. But the debts never stopped. Eventually, Zane got tangled in something he couldn't escape. He was trafficked overseas. No one ever heard from him again. A few months ago, I received an unfamiliar international call. A hoarse, familiar voice, ingratiating and desperate. "Sis, it's me. I ran into some trouble. Can you send me $10,000? You've got the wrong number," I replied. Then I hung up and blocked him. From that moment on, Zane ceased to exist in my world. As for my mother, tormented by years of dealing with Zane's messes, burdened by a crippled husband and shattered by the loss of her son, she eventually succumbed to schizophrenia. So, in the end, spoiling a child to the extreme didn't bring them happiness, did it? I pressed a hand to my heart, only to find I felt nothing at all. I had long since changed my name to Radiance. The past is buried in darkness, untouchable. But the road ahead is bright and endless. And now, I finally stand on the stage of my own life.